Hey everyone, welcome to Psychophilo. I'm host A and this is host B. If you're new here, buckle up because we're about to change how you see the world. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Everything happening right now, politics, society, poverty, health, conflict, progress, collapse, it all comes down to one fundamental truth. We are humans, and being human means we're born with psychology and philosophy running through our veins. Every single decision, every system, every problem, every solution, it all traces back to how we think, how we feel, what we believe, and why we believe it. That's what Psychophilo is about. We're building a lens, a way of seeing the world that reveals the hidden patterns, the psychological motivations behind policy, the philosophical assumptions beneath society, the mental structures shaping poverty, the beliefs driving health outcomes. This isn't just another history channel. This isn't just psychology lectures. We're connecting dots that nobody's connecting. We're showing you that understanding the world requires understanding psychology and philosophy first. Because when you see through the Psychophilo lens, everything makes sense. Politics, it's psychology and philosophy clashing. Social inequality, it's rooted in how humans psychologically perceive value and hierarchy. Health crises, they're shaped by our collective psychology and the philosophical frameworks we've accepted. We're focused psychophilosophical way of every decision, news, trades, wars that you see, because human psychology is universal. Philosophy is universal. The way we think, the way we're motivated, the way we rationalize, that's the same everywhere. This episode, it's the foundation, the historical background of why this lens matters. We're telling you the story of how psychology was invented, not as abstract theory, but as a desperate attempt by humans to understand themselves. This is the story that explains why everything else we'll explore, politics, society, economics, conflict, only makes sense when you understand the psychological and philosophical roots. So this episode is your groundwork. After this, every topic we cover, whether it's geopolitics, trade, national politics, world economic policy, Indian economic policy, global sanctions, social movements, you'll see how it all connects back to psychology and philosophy. Welcome to Psychophilo, where nothing is just politics. Nothing is just economics. Everything is psychology and philosophy playing out in the real world.
For thousands of years, humans wondered about the human mind. How do we think? Why do we feel? What makes us, us? But here's the thing. Every single answer came from philosophers sitting in rooms, arguing, theorizing, but never actually testing anything. Exactly. Plato said the soul was immortal. Aristotle said thinking happened in the heart. Descartes comes along with his wild idea that the mind and body are two separate things having some kind of cosmic conversation inside us.
And people just believed them because what else were you supposed to do? It's not like you could run an experiment on consciousness, right?
Right. But here's where it gets interesting. By the 1600s, everything changes. The scientific revolution is happening everywhere else. Physics, chemistry, biology, everything is being measured, tested, proven.
So you'd think the mind would be next, right? Psychology would become scientific.
You'd think, but it didn't. Psychology stayed stuck in philosophy, and this is where it gets kind of absurd.
Why? What was stopping it?
Imagine if medicine was still just philosophers debating what causes fever, while physicists are already discovering atoms. That's where psychology was, completely out of step. We could measure the speed of light, calculate planetary orbits, dissect the human body, and understand how it works.
But we couldn't scientifically understand the very thing doing all the measuring and calculating.
The human mind, exactly. The irony is brutal. The most advanced tool we had was studying everything except itself.
So what breaks? Something had to give, right?
Something did, but not with a bang. With a measurement, a simple, elegant measurement that changed everything. And that measurement came from a German physiologist in the 1850s. Who? Hermann von Helmholtz. And his discovery? It was going to crack open the entire philosophical fortress around the mind.
What did he discover?
He measured something people thought was unmeasurable: the speed of nerve impulses traveling through the human body. Before Helmholtz, people thought it was instantaneous, unmeasurable, almost spiritual. But he proved them wrong. He measured it, about 90 meters per second, finite, concrete, scientific.
Wait, that sounds simple. Why is that revolutionary?
Because if nerve impulses could be measured, that meant the nervous system and, by extension, mental processes could be studied using the tools of science. The mind wasn't metaphysical anymore. It was physical. It was material. It could be quantified. And suddenly, the whole philosophical framework that had protected psychology for 2,000 years started cracking. Other researchers started asking, what if all of psychology could be science? Then Darwin comes along. Yes, 1859, On the Origin of Species. The intellectual landscape shifts seismically. If humans evolved like every other animal, shaped by survival, adaptation, environment, then our behavior isn't divinely ordained. It's explainable. It follows patterns. And suddenly, psychology doesn't need to apologize for being science. It has to be science because evolution demands it.
Okay, so everyone's ready, the moment is there, but knowing something should be scientific is one thing, actually making it scientific is another. Someone has to take the leap.
Someone has to say, I'm opening a lab. I'm treating consciousness like a chemistry experiment. I'm quantifying the unmeasurable.
And that someone was
Wilhelm Wundt, German physiologist, 47 years old, University of Leipzig, August 1879. And he was about to start a revolution that nobody expected.
So Wundt walks into this laboratory in 1879. What exactly is he doing that's so revolutionary? It sounds like a normal lab.
That's the thing. It looks normal. Instruments, controlled conditions, systematic experiments. But nobody had ever done this before with consciousness.
With the mind.
Right, not a medical clinic, not a philosophy department, a laboratory dedicated to studying the mind itself. And more than that, Wundt calls himself a psychologist, the first person to officially use that title.
Wait, seriously?
The first? The first. Imagine the audacity. For 2,000 years, philosophers owned that territory, and this physiologist walks in and says, actually, I'm a psychologist now, and I'm studying this scientifically.
He must have had some serious credentials to pull that off.
He did. In 1873, 6 years earlier, he publishes Principles of Physiological Psychology, outlining how mental processes have physical, measurable bases in the nervous system. He'd already been teaching the first scientific psychology course since 1862. He'd been laying groundwork for a decade.
So by 1879, everyone knows what's coming. Exactly. Psychology as science. Not as philosophy, not as speculation, science. But here's where it gets interesting. What does he actually do in that lab? What's his method? He studies consciousness itself. He believed consciousness could be broken down into basic elements: sensations, feelings, images, and those elements could be identified and measured through introspection.
Introspection? People reporting their own conscious experiences?
Trained observers reporting under controlled conditions. And Wundt analyzes the patterns. It sounds crude now. Modern psychology would tear that approach apart.
But in 1879?
It was revolutionary. Psychology moved from armchairs to laboratories, from debate to data, from philosophy to science. That shift alone changed everything. So what happens next? The impact is immediate and global. Wundt's lab becomes a pilgrimage site. Ambitious psychologists from America, Europe, Russia, they come, they learn his methods, they work in his lab, then they go home and open their own.
Within decades, psychology laboratories exist everywhere.
Exactly. By 1890, William James, American psychologist, publishes the Principles of Psychology, 1,300 pages. It becomes the definitive text. But James takes a different approach than Wundt.
How?
Wundt focuses on dissecting consciousness, breaking it into components. James focuses on what consciousness does, how it functions in real life, how it adapts to environmental demands, how it serves survival. So they're different schools already, completely different. But they agree on the fundamentals. Psychology is science. The mind is measurable. Human behavior follows patterns that can be discovered through systematic investigation.
And that's the moment the age of philosophical speculation dies.
The age of scientific psychology begins. Within 1 decade, from 1879 to 1890, psychology transforms from a philosophical discipline to an established science with laboratories, methods, competing theories, university positions. It actually worked. It worked. And the crazy part is, nobody forced it. Wundt didn't have government backing or massive funding. He just opened a lab and started doing science. And the scientific community responded. They took it seriously. They did. Because it was rigorous, because it produced results, because it promised answers to questions philosophy couldn't answer. Psychology became science because psychology had to become science.
So curiosity isn't the real reason. What is? By the 1800s, industrialization creates chaos. Factories, cities, massive populations. And alongside that misery comes something that baffles the entire system.
What?
Mental illness. Breakdowns, hysteria, neuroses, irrational behavior. Asylums are overflowing. Doctors have no idea what to do. Traditional medicine can't help. Philosophy definitely can't help.
So psychology became necessary out of desperation.
Partly. There were suffering human beings that the old systems of knowledge simply couldn't address, and that created urgency. Psychiatrists and medical doctors realized they needed to understand the mind systematically, not for philosophy's sake, for healing's sake.
That's why Freud emerges from that world.
Exactly. Freud is treating patients with psychological wounds. Wilhelm Wundt is a physiologist trying to map the nervous system. William James is interested in education and how people learn. They're not abstract philosophers. They're practical people facing real problems.
Psychology was invented because humans were suffering.
And traditional knowledge couldn't explain that suffering. That's the real origin story. Not curiosity, necessity, desperation, the need to heal what couldn't be healed with existing systems.
But there's another reason, too, isn't there?
Yes. And this is the part that doesn't get talked about much. Social control.